That's what James is eating today with some berries, and it's that. So we just took the chicken out, and he gave it to the dogs, and the Thai red curry, and he's going to talk about It Might Get Loud, and this Bruce Springsteen video collection, and that. So that's what we're doing here, and I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna sit out of the frame because It's gonna be James talking, so you may as well just go ahead and do that.
So I want to make sure I get this covered so you can get it back to the library.
Yeah.
So it's called Legends, Icons, and Rebels. On the front cover, you got Billie Holiday, Chuck Berry, Bob Dylan, Beatles. I thought it was about rock and roll at first, but it goes back to Louis Armstrong, and the hit from Louis Armstrong dates from on the last page, second last page. Where are you, Louis? Well, it dates from on the last page. There's a kind of little
There's a
envelope
couple
here that
CDs.
hold the
Yeah.
CD.
And one thing, I was shocked at how few songs they put on each CD in this day and age. I mean, and a subject like that, you're making a mix of a whole bunch of different artists. They
Especially
shouldn't have
this
fill it out.
stuff. It was kind of ideal to have stuff around 2.5 minutes long.
Yeah.
So if you got, I think it was 37 songs all told, 20 on the first, 17 on the second. Doesn't give the number. Oh, it does. It's actually 15 on the second. I was being a little charitable, right? And how much on the first? It's even less. 12. So it's 27, all told. So 27 times 2.5, even if it's times 3, and it isn't, that is on 2 CDs, understand. It's like 60, 81 minutes. That's 40 minutes per. Huh?
Yeah.
That's what they used to put on records on 2 sides. But on CDs, you can put almost twice that amount. You can put, what, 78 minutes on a CD?
Yeah, for sure.
You know, like, don't do that. Like, there's plenty of stuff to put in here. There should be twice the number of songs on there.
And another thing, I mean, it's you look at the book and it looks like a great big, like a coffee table book, like a kind of like a magazine or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And really, it is. There's too many pictures in there, and the writing's kind of big, and whatever.
Yeah. Well, some of the fine print, somewhere in it actually. They explained that there was some music teacher who said, I can't teach them traditional kid songs. They respond more strongly to pop songs from way back when. Out-of-date pop songs. I think that's someone's imagination. But this is an attempt to respond to that kind of input. It's not their fault. It's some teacher's fault, right?
Yeah, but even, I mean, we were looking at the songs that were selected for there, and we were thinking, okay, if you're going to feature something by this artist, why this song, or whatever,
Well,
a lot of the time, right?
Well,
Not all the time.
I was thinking not so much for the age group, but generally it's actually maybe a little bit. The one was the Beatles with, if you're going to aim for low, you don't do something, you do Yellow Submarine, for a young age or something like that. But they could have done so much better for the Beatles. They went with something. That's not a Lennon-McCartney song. So Chuck Berry, Johnny B. Good, no problem. I'll just go through the list. Johnny Cash, well, that's a rock and roll thing. It dates from 56. Get Rhythm. Aretha Franklin, I Say a Little Prayer. Well, that's kind of like the Brill Building stuff. Something like a rock and roll response to Tin Pan Alley, Backrack, and David. It would be better to do, they had Carole King in here. Better to do a Carole King composition, maybe with her then husband Jerry Goffin, called Natural Woman. or Otis Redding is in here, and Otis Redding composition Resbect. But I Say a Little Prayer for You is not what one would think of as being anything like Aretha Franklin's typical stuff. It's something you think of when you think of Dionne Warwick, who's something like an aunt for Whitney Houston. And she actually did it. Got the hit with it, I think. I Say a Little Prayer. So that's not a good choice by any means. The Beatles, Here Comes the Sun. Well, I thought it was something, but Here Comes the Sun, I prefer to that, but yeah, it's kind of a thing a kid could respond to, but you got to give them something that's a little more typical of the Beatles, some sort of Lennon McCartney.
Why not
composition.
Paperback Writer?
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, it's so
Because
great because I mean they didn't feature anything by the Beach Boys in there, did they? Oh, they did.
Yeah, it's a very early one called In My Room. It's actually from 1963. It sounds very sophisticated. It's laid back. It's not typical Beach Boy stuff. Like, what kid's going to respond to a guy singing about just being alone in his room and all that sort of stuff, and it's
Maybe.
slow paced? Not really. It was too mature for the Beach Boys audience, really. But I was thinking Good Vibrations, but that might be a
that
little
would have been a
complicated.
good one.
It might be a little complicated for a kid, but you could throw in any of
No,
those
they'd
surfing
love it.
songs.
It has
Maybe.
a lot of. It's fun.
Maybe. I don't know. I liked it ever since I heard it from way back when. And that's the one to play for them. Doesn't matter what age. Like when it's got sophisticated composition, all that sort of stuff. And the lyrics aren't bad.
Or what's that, like, is it called Sloop John D or whatever? What's that song
Well,
called?
it sounds like a folk song from Jamaica or something. Sloop John D. It's classic.
Totally. Kids would love that. Anyone would love it.
Of
So
course.
I don't know why they
But
didn't
they
throw
had
that.
all
But whatever.
sorts of stuff. Like
I didn't
upbeat
even
kind of
remember the Beach Boys song on there. I just thought they didn't have the Beach Boys on there, and I
Yeah,
thought,
I know.
well, that's
It's-
funny.
it's
And then
one that
I thought,
kind of-
well, if they're not gonna have the Beach Boys, then why not have the Beatles kind of trying to do the Beach Boys with Paperback Writer, right? 'Cause that's
But
way
they
more
actually surpassed them, except for Good Vibrations. That's better than any Beach Boys song.
fun. Yeah.
Not in terms of the vocals. I mean, Brian Wilson was. I don't think anyone in rock and roll who's made a big hit has ever been as good as Brian Wilson for coming up with counterpoint, particularly in harmonies and so on and so forth. So that's Here Comes the Sun. I like that song, but I don't think it's appropriate. Louis Armstrong, What a Wonderful World. Well, it's the one everyone thinks of.
That one is the one I'd put on of his because everybody thinks of him for that.
Bob Marley, Three Little Birds. I've never heard it before.
No,
and
not that one.
Can't say I'd go out of my way to hear it again. I wouldn't hate it. And there's two songs, big hits by Buddy Holly that I don't care for that much. One was Peggy Sue Got Married and Peggy Sue. I just never liked that kind of beat, how it goes. Anyway, you could have put in any Buddy Holly song in here, even one written by Paul Anka. It doesn't matter anymore or something like that. And it would have been a better choice. But Peggy Sue might have been his biggest hit. I'm not sure why, but you could have. It's all. What is it? It's all right. Well, all right. It's like something that someone says, well, all right, but he changes it around a little bit. Our lifetime love would be all right. But Buddy Holly was just had very few songs. He died when he was 22 apparently, but most of the stuff is well worth it. Joni Mitchell, The Circle Game. And you kind of notice that would be maybe it's kind of like a sing-along or something like that.
Yeah.
And it
okay.
actually is talking about growing older. It was written as a response to Neil Young's Sugar Mountain. You've heard that song, where you can't be something like 20 on Sugar Mountain. So she was saying, it ain't that bad to grow old.
No, it's great. It's way better for a woman to be over 50. If you're mentally adjusted, then
It's way better for a guy. People should be, like I live to not learn solely, to discover with what I learn. And I'm still discovering stuff, and I'm 71. I don't know how long it's going to last, but I'm better at doing it now than I was age 20 and age 30. Not quite age 40, but I'm about as good as I was at age 40. Not as good as maybe I was at age 50 or 60, but I'm still pretty sharp. There's no excuse if someone's going to seed unless they've got something physically wrong with them, and like some sort of congenital condition. If they've got something like diabetes, and it's adult diabetes, that's on them. Okay?
Yeah, well, sometimes, I mean, I've heard that children now are getting adult onset diabetes.
And it's inevitable when you
So,
see
I
how
mean,
much
can
they
you really
develop.
say that's not their fault? They're children.
Yeah. Anyway, Ray Charles and the Raylettes, Hit the Road Jack. I always thought that was, I first heard that in 64. I thought it was put out 63 when I was in Africa, but it was 61. It just would have been on radio stations my parents wouldn't have been listening to. I remember hearing Elvis way back when. I think it might have been 62, Wooden Heart, but that was a pop kind of thing, not so much rock and roll. It was actually a German song that he heard, had it translated in English, and then he sang it. I got no problem with Hit the Road Jack. Elvis Presley, Hound Dog, well, something a kid could respond to, but it's way repetitive. Give them a little bit of meat, like the Jailhouse Rock. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, well, maybe they didn't want to give, jailhouse kind of thing to kids or something, but that would have been the way more fun one.
Yeah. Curtis Mayfield and the Pressure. I didn't know it was from 65. People get ready. There's a train a-coming. I always liked that song pretty well. Billie Holiday and the Orchestra, Let's Call the Whole Thing Off. It's a Gershwin composition. I got no problem with that.
Yeah, whatever.
They couldn't do Strange Fruit, which is about
No,
hanging.
they couldn't do that one for kids. I mean, that's the one you think of for her, but yeah.
Little Richard, Lucille, and I don't think there's any dirty lyrics in that or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty tough to put a Little Richard thing in for kids.
Well, I mean, Tutti Frutti, you can't tell.
Yeah.
The original lyrics were all expurgated, or the song was expurgated of its original lyrics. And Good Golly Miss Molly, you can't have in that there, because you sure love to dance, but it means something else too. And I'm sure Little Richard meant that. And it's a synonym for dance. And then Hank Williams, Jambalaya on the Bayou. I guess Kalijah would be considered too politically incorrect or something like that. Poor old Kalijah. And I'm so lonesome I could cry. No wonder kids committing suicide. Poor Hank Williams. I didn't realize he had bad back trouble. Maybe that explains why he had a little trouble with a variety of different medicaments and so on and so forth. Frank Sinatra, Fly Me to the Moon. Boy, would I like to in the Jackie Gleason sense. Like, that guy was a real scumbag. They say in here, in the little write-up, some people say he might have been involved with he was involved with the mafia. He hung with mafia types all over the place. Get that straight. Don't make up excuses for people. You don't have to talk about it. If you do talk about it, then you better talk straight about it. You don't want to mention Chuck Berry and his fascination for women in washrooms and stuff like that. You don't mention it in a book like this. But you don't go and say, some people say he had a fascination with, he did. Okay, he got convicted. It was like putting cameras in Berry Park and stuff like that, in women's washrooms, and for his later delectation or something like that. Fly Me to the Moon. Marvin Gaye, I heard it through the grapevine. I can think of some songs that I prefer by Marvin Gaye, but not many. And that's the classic one. Carole King, So Far Away. Do something with Carole King and Jerry Goffin. They had a babysitter called Little Eva, and she's the one who did Locomotion. She was doing a dance, I guess, that looked like a locomotion, right? And they said, we'll write this for Little Eva. And then they actually had her singing it. And it was a big hit in the early 60s and stuff like that, something a kid could respond to. I only heard it when I was getting around 20. I'm going, I like rock and roll. I like Little Eva. And I like locomotion. But not so far away. Yes, for the longest while, the biggest selling album in rock history was from 1971, I believe, and 1971, Carole King's Tapestry. Didn't deserve that, but that's more than Sgt. Pepper's, more than Revolver, more than Pet Sounds. Well, for some reason, the classic Beach Boys album didn't sell well. Sold reasonably well in England, apparently, not in the United States. Sam Cooke, Wonderful World. That's a wonderful choice because it's got very good lyrics, got a wonderful tune. Well, the guy just put in a great performance. He almost always did. Every so occasion, what was it? We heard a couple of on that Sam Cooke thing that I reviewed the other day. They did a remake of something and it was inappropriate. But he always did a good singing job. Louis Jordan, Caledonia. I never knew who did that. I always would hear it around Caledonia. Caledonia, what makes your big feet so flat? I don't know. But and that dates back to 1945. Like Chuck Berry said, he's the guy who created rock and roll, father of rock and roll, Louis Jordan. Or Louis Jordan, I don't know how they pronounce these. Beach Boys, In My Room, 1963, September 16th. So that's before the Beatles hit it in the United States. It's got some pretty good lyrics. Generally, I've got to say this about the Beach Boys. They generally had some lyrics that stood up to the music enough. So Mike Haight, or as he was better known, Mike Love, wrote a lot of their surfing lyrics and their girl. They should spell girl in their stuff G-U-R-A-L because that's the way they'd sing it. California girls. But like he wrote the lyrics to California Girls. It makes sense. Mm-hmm. They're not really great poetry or anything like that, but generally they had some at least okay lyrics. So yeah, you got to get something better. There's all sorts of. You put California Girls, okay, it's sexist. Put in.
Well, we already talked about
409. Well, there are other options.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There's all the car songs. Maybe you don't want kids going out and breaking everyone's necks and their own necks, driving cars too fast and stuff like that. But they had all sorts of car songs. They had all sorts of girl songs, all sorts of surfing songs. And then there's Good Vibrations, which transcends being a girl song. Okay, James Brown, I Got You, I Feel Good. Yeah, that's a lot better than later stuff. It's catchy. Patsy Cline.
Well, it's better than It's a Man's World.
The funny thing is it's actually called It's a Man's World. In case you don't get the message. Yeah, or Papa's Got a Brand New Bag or whatever. Those are his big hits, I think, from the mid-'60s. And then he went into funk, and oh my God. Patsy Cline, Crazy. That's a little bit mature for kids, don't you think? Written by Willie Nelson.
Yeah, it's great, though.
I think it dates from the early 60s or late 50s, 1961. It's good. The lyrics actually make sense. Otis Redding, That's How Strong My Love Is. I know that from a Rolling Stones version, but I am telling you, Otis Redding, I think, does a better version. I think he might have written that song, too. Nat King Cole, It's Only a Paper Moon. Do you like Nat King Cole's version of that?
No, I wouldn't have picked him for that song.
Okay.
And, if you're going to put Nat King Cole on, why put that song?
Well, he did lots of stuff. I don't think he ever really put a foot wrong. Really
No.
Nice voice. Apparently, he was originally something like a session, well, not so much a session, but he'd be playing live, a piano player. He's just a amazing kind of guy. And that brings up the next guy, Stevie Wonder, play all sorts of things. And a lot of people are multi-instrumentalists, aren't drummers, but he could play drums.
Oh,
Stevie
sorry,
Wonder.
Ed.
Eighth wonder of the world. But I never, I like Nat King Cole's vocal styling, but not Stevie Wonder's. Too much yipping and yodeling. Stick to the lyric and interpret it the way Marvin Gaye did until they let him loose, and starting with what's going on. Motown thought that wasn't going to go anywhere. Guess what? It didn't deserve to go anywhere, much less to the top 10 lists of rock and roll critics everywhere. Wow, that's one of the top 10 albums. What? It wasn't even the top 10 album of 1971 or whenever it was released. It might not have been the top 10 album released that week it was released. It's not good. I'm not going to say it's awful, but not good. And you notice his vocal style. He's got when you listen to Heard It Through the Grapevine, you know what he's singing.
Mm-hmm.
But then, all sorts of yipping and yapping in between lines and so on and so forth. Yeah, don't like it. And Bob Dylan, Forever Young, that's how they close it up. Now, Robbie Robertson, who's they have a comment about each one of these acts from Robbie Robertson. He looks to be the driving force behind this. He was the guitar player, not just the lead guitar player. It's kind of funny for a rock and roll group. After the Beatles, and the Rolling Stones, the band only had one guitarist. So he played lead, but he wasn't much. When you hear Robbie Robertson, there's not many leads. It's basically you do the job, and you don't step out too far. But he played on Forever Young. And maybe that's something a kid could respond to in a certain way. I don't know if you even know the song, but it's definitely not Bob Dylan's best song. You don't have to throw in, 11 minutes or whatever. I don't think Desolation Row is that long, but 6 minutes of Like a Rolling Stone, 11 minutes or 12 minutes, 13 minutes of Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands. You can put some stuff in by Bob Dylan that a kid, a sharper kid's going to respond to. I can remember getting hold of Bob Dylan's biggest hits album in 1967. How old was it? 67? Somewhere, maybe 69. I would have been about 15. I knew it wasn't what I was expecting. It was actually, there's someone in my family was saying Bob Dylan was a singles act. And I'm going, what? He put out some of the worst singles in the world, like Rainy Day Women, numbers 12 and 35. You Gotta Serve Somebody. Forever Young's not that good. The best cuts, oftentimes, he never released at all, not even on an album. But there was only, I think, one release off of his best album, Highway 61 Revisited, and that's Like a Rolling Stone. I am telling you, there are lots of rock and roll critics saying that's an awesome song. There's way too much repetition in the choruses and all that sort of stuff. Pretty good lines in some of the verses, but there are any number of songs on that album that cut Like a Rolling Stone to pieces. Desolation Row, From a Buick 6, on and on it goes. So I can't think of a song. Why not Subterranean Homesick Blues?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just full of a welter of words. Kids not going to understand it.
Yeah, they'd love
I didn't really understand that much about it anyway. It's kind of a remake, or so I'm told. There are significant changes if it is a remake of Chuck Berry's Too Much Monkey Business. And to be perfectly frank, Chuck Berry's Too Much Monkey Business for me to be involved in. It's something a kid can relate to, even though he's probably about 30 when he wrote and recorded Too Much Monkey Business. But and unfortunately, that's the way it was with Chuck Berry. Too much monkey business. He did serious time, I think, twice in his life in jail. And I don't think he really contested that there's some people are honest. I don't think he'd argue that he didn't deserve the jail time, stuff like that. Probably tried to fight it in court, whatever. Maybe he didn't. He liked money. In his autobiography, he talks about when he knew he was a millionaire. He kept close account of his money, but he was so careful with his money. He didn't have a band. What he'd do is he'd hit a town, and he'd hire a group, just a local group, because everyone knew his tunes.
Stuff, sure.
Everyone knew his tunes. And of course, he'd be paying a pittance to them. if anything, if he walked into town and I knew my guitar chops, I'd play with him for free, just to be able to say I backed up Chuck Berry. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
But
Yeah, probably didn't have to pay them.
but he was annoyed. I was going to say something off. We'll say teed off with the music business because he got ripped off right royally. But so did the Beatles. It wasn't just a race thing or anything like that. The Beatles got ripped off. They were pretty well as white as you can get. And stuff like that. Elvis Presley got ripped off and kept on getting ripped off by the Dutch guy, a Dutch illegal immigrant in the United States, Colonel Parker. He wasn't a colonel. Colonel Corn, maybe. Cornball. So, what would I say about this? If you can sell this to the kids, good luck to it. Yeah, because most of this stuff kids would have no use for. Showing the other day, there's some wonderful pictures in here. You know, big. Yeah, you're right to compare it to a magazine.
Well, that is a nice picture.
That's a great picture of Buddy Holly flashing off his. He looked really handsome without the glasses. You know that?
Mm-hmm.
He just went with it. I don't know what the scene was.
Well, it makes them memorable.
It makes it memorable. The thing that got me was there was a group in the 60s called Freddie and the Dreamers, and they were awful, and their lead singer adopted that look. So for the longest time, I thought, this is before I'd ever heard of Buddy Holly, I thought that look was really ultra geeky, but what the hey, I kind of like those bone rim glasses or whatever they're called.
But yeah, the paintings or whatever they did of people.
Yeah, they're paintings. So
good.
this is just taken probably from an album cover. That's a pretty good take on the Beach Boys, you know. This poor guy, you know, like, I don't know if he's even 20, and he's running to Tal. Back then, of course, half the guys at university looked like poor Carl Wilson looked like at the same age. Ella Fitzgerald, not a very good picture of her.
No, I think
You know, it should be like bright and joyous. This is the kind of stuff you have with Billie Holiday, where she looks kind of sick and depressed or whatever. No, that's about the worst one I can think of. James Brown, that one's kind of weird.
kind of interesting.
Well, I know.
Yeah, they did the
it's
job
okay. It
there.
makes him look psychedelic, and I think he's kind of like the opposite of psychedelic. You know, people might think, oh, he's just let it hang out, all kind of guy. If you were playing drums, you'd be playing in living fear, playing behind James Brown, because you were going to get fined for every time you missed a beat, skipped a beat. You were going to get fined if James Brown caught it. Right? That's a nice picture of Patsy Cline, eh?
Mm-hmm.
That's a nice picture of Otis Redding. It doesn't really capture me. You know, like, he was a big guy, and, you know, like, he tried to move on stage, but newsflash, big guys are clumsy. You know? I didn't like playing with big guys in soccer. I'm average height. Well, I used to be.
They didn't do a good job there.
Yeah, I know.
He was actually
like,
handsome, and they made him look terrible.
Well, it looks as though he's bleeding at the lips. Like, what's going on there? It looks as though he's playing harmonica for too long.
I guess that's okay.
Stevie Wonder, I don't know. They could have done something better there.
They could.
How much time? 10?
24 seconds.
Bob Dylan looks as though he's hungover.
He does, yeah.
He was kind of hungover a lot during that period, smoking too many cigarettes, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, some of them look cartoonish, like Hank Williams there. Louis Armstrong, that's pretty good. Anyway, there you go. Does it come recommended?